Welcome to Intergalactic Tarboush, eclectic conversations from the Mena with Iyad al-Baghdadi and me, Ahmed Gatnash. We talk about politics, activism, tech, spirituality, mental health, and more.
Hey man, how are you doing, man?
Very good, thanks. So, what have you been up to today?
Today, well, it's been interesting trying to like in the morning I normally spend some time reading, right? Like I have half an hour of reading every morning. But then since my tab count has hit 170, I decided, instead of me sitting and reading, let me try to integrate the information that's already open and just take notes about them or close them, etc.
Do you ever feel like you're in a race against your own self? Whether you can read the stuff faster than you're opening more stuff?
Honestly, I don't want to get into my bookmarks from 2011 because I haven't gone through that
Last
yet.
week I realised that I have some tabs open on my laptop that I opened last spring and I never got around to reading them. And when I looked at them, they were all like really interesting stuff. But
it is really interesting. That's why I can't really get rid of it. Because, like, I could have always said, you know what, just delete all of them. But actually, it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, but sometimes there's just so much of it that you feel pressured to read it, and you end up reading it not out of joy, but because you feel like you have to get some tabs closed.
I mean, I kind of I use one tab. It's one of those what do you say? Those plugins for Chrome, where it kind of saves all of your tabs in one go. But then if you do that, then you will have a one tab problem then. Because I do have things on one tab going back to 2014 or something that I haven't gotten to.
Yeah, I reached the point where the only real solutions are opening less or reading more. Anything else is just like hiding the problem in a different place.
And to be honest, I got to the point where I realized that this is a permanent problem. We are always going to be faced with more information that we find interesting that we actually have time for.
Yeah.
And maybe we should just accept it that this will be what it is. You're never going to get to the bottom of that list. It's kind of like just like your timeline on Twitter is bottomless.
Yeah, it's part of the human condition now in the 21st century.
I guess.
I was kind of thinking about how, like, I wonder, like, I was thinking about regrets people have when they die, and I wonder, like, I was actually thinking, like, will this ever be one of my regrets that, there was that really fascinating thing that I wish I'd read? And, it sounds silly, but I actually think maybe I will think, there's so many mysteries in the universe and, so many incredible things that God created, and we'll just never get to the bottom of all of them. Like, we'll take mysteries to our graves.
To be honest, so this what you just said about like dying reminded me of two particular moments, to be honest, and these are poignant moments. They're painful moments, but you just reminded me of them. The first was in I can't remember the exact date. It was either sometime between 2011 and 2013 when I had a really bad asthma attack and I almost died. And I actually had a near-death experience.
This is when you actually got taken to the ER, right?
Yeah, I was in the ICU for a few days, and it was terrible because I literally almost died. And I remember a thought. So, like, when you are at that moment when you actually are about to die, of course you don't think of these things. But then after that, you're sitting and recovering. One of the thoughts that came to my mind was like, how abrupt is it that I have to-dos? I have a desk full of papers. My desktop is completely like full of things that I will never get to. And the thought got to my head is like how this thing called death, it's always going to come at a time which is like inconvenient to you. I mean, except like I think very, very few people actually get to like settle all of their affairs before they die.
Yeah.
But then I got the same thought when my friend Bassam Sabri died in 2014. It was the same kind of thought that so many things unfinished. You die with so many projects and so many ideas and so many just unfinished. I don't know how we got into something, got the conversation into a dark alley here, but
I don't know. I think it's only dark if you think about it in a certain way. Maybe it's just like an incredibly rare blessing that God gives to certain people, that he allows them to go to their grave having actually finished.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe actually it's not that bad to go to your grave with things unfinished. It shows that you've been working until the
And
last
it also, it's a shift in perspective when you accept that actually I'm never going to get to that finished state, so I just have to enjoy the process instead.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, the reason why we started down this path when you asked me about what I'm thinking, and I said about my tabs, and I never actually got to tell you what comes out of that. Whenever I do that, my Rome ends up with so many points, so many interesting ideas that I collected from my tabs, and I just put there thinking, okay, either I'll get to them later, or this is it, just interesting ideas in my knowledge base and a
It's
tag,
the harvest.
right? Exactly, yeah. So sometimes, I just mention it just like that, put in the link, and sometimes I kind of, okay, this is interesting, let me think about it. But actually what I've been most thinking about is really the format of this podcast / video. And I'm starting to, two things really coming to my mind. The first is we are going to be learning the format ourselves, we are the ones who write, there's no script for this, so it's not scripted, but we basically do a little bit of preparation for every recording, and we're the people on camera, right, and being recorded. And I think that we are going to be experimenting for a while. It's always going to be an educational experience, especially when we're just starting out with something new. I mean, the idea here is that these are eclectic conversations between two people within the Kawakidi ecosystem. And I've been thinking, initially we were thinking this can only work with me and you. But I'm starting to think maybe not. Maybe other people in the ecosystem can also have very eclectic ideas and very interesting conversations. The other thing that came to my mind really is that it's also going to be kind of an educational experience because we haven't done video before. I mean, the Arab Tyrant Manual was always just audio only as a podcast. And I think we're also going to be learning a little bit about how to I mean, the whole idea of doing this is that we want it to be listenable. So we want people to be able to just listen to the track without watching the video. But we also want the video to be there on YouTube, etc., so that people can watch it also if they wish.
Yeah, if they wish being the operative thing. We don't know if anyone actually wants to watch our ugly faces yet. But even with the podcast, the Arab Tyrant Manual, we learned a lot, and you can hear the evolution by listening to earlier and then later episodes, but I don't think we ever reached the top of the learning curve and stabilized. So there's still a lot to learn, and hopefully the longer we iterate on this, the better the quality will become.
I mean, if there is one thing I would want our listeners or viewers to tell us about, it's really this, what is it that makes us unique? Because we knew that we had a very interesting demographic on the Arab Tyrant Manual. We had a really good thing going, and now, of course, it's being relaunched, so I hope that kind of comes back. But we never really drilled down, we never actually did kind of a focus group to ask people, what is it that makes this unique?
Yeah.
My own impression really is that, we are natives. We are not really from outside the region speaking about it. We're natives. We're, from the Middle East and North Africa, talking about issues of global importance, not only about the Middle East and North Africa. We're talking about, global authoritarianism, economic models, the future, etc. But at the same time, we're kind of coming from the trenches. We have skin in the game. We are, fighters in the middle of this, rather than someone who's like an academic. Not throwing shade at academics. Some academics are also fighters, but I'm just saying that we're not coming with a detached perspective. We are coming with a more passionate perspective, and I guess our analysis was pretty good.
Yeah, I hope so. I like to think so. But yeah, basically, if you're listening to this, why? Let us know.
Yeah.
So anyway, what?
So tell me what you've been. Tell me. No, I'm gonna ask first. What have you been thinking about? What's on your mind?
So I read this really interesting thing about bird lungs. Did you know that birds actually have air intake and air output through different openings?
Yeah, I think that they do it at the same time. So it's actually circulating at the same time. So it's not like us where they have to take a breath and then they have to breathe it out. Right?
And that gives them really efficient lungs, and that's why they can fly over Everest and stuff like that. Do you know where they got that system from? So they hold it from dinosaurs.
I wonder why dinosaurs would have needed that.
I actually dug into it and I found the answer. So basically, life on like solid Earth began when plants came out of water, and initially they just clung to rocks like moss because they were used to having like no downward force to fight against because they were in the sea, and suddenly they had gravity with nothing lifting them up. And after several million years, they evolved the type of material to be able to stand upright. And then they started growing trunks and branches and going upwards. But when they died and fell, that material, I've actually forgotten the name, but that material which they built upwards with couldn't be broken down. So it was just being stored as carbon in the earth. And because of that, the ratio of oxygen in the atmosphere went up significantly. I think it went over 30%. And if you get to about 40%, that's when lightning can basically spontaneously combust the atmosphere. So after that, I think fungi evolved the ability to break it down, and they broke it down by taking in oxygen and locking it in with the carbon molecules to create CO2 and water. And that began to take oxygen out of the atmosphere again. And then the ratio of oxygen in the atmosphere dipped massively over several million years again to something like 12%. Having massive amounts of oxygen in the atmosphere means that you don't need to have a very efficient breathing system. And when you lose all of that and you go down to 12%, I think something like 90% of life on Earth collapsed because it just couldn't adapt. And then you had to have stuff evolve to have incredibly efficient breathing systems in order to be able to handle such a low concentration of oxygen. But then when the oxygen went back up again and stabilized at around the 30% we have today, really massive creatures evolved because there was so much oxygen, it was too easy. And that's why we got dinosaurs, but also, well, that's part of the reason we got dinosaurs, but also, creatures like frogs the size of dinner tables. So I just thought that was really cool.
I mean, I'm fascinated. I told you for a while now. I'm kind of when I want to watch something which is not politics or not related to work, I end up watching these videos either about deep time astrology, astronomy, or evolution. And so I kind of gathered a lot of information over like 3.5 or 4 years. Passively, because I kind of watch it while I'm cooking or working out, etc., when I don't want to think about work. But this kind of reminded me of a recent video I watched about kind of a comparison between the Earth and Venus. And how the Earth and Venus, basically, the Earth, Venus, and Mars, I think, at some point had very similar conditions. In fact, it's speculated. Of course, everything I'm saying is speculative because scientists, of course, don't agree on everything. But the idea is that, why is it that Earth specifically out of these 3 planets is the one that ended up capable of supporting life long term? Meanwhile, Mars and Venus are kind of desolate now. Venus is basically a hell world, it's hell.
So basically, if you start from the beginning of the solar system, these are kind of 3 rocks which emerged in similar circumstances and looked the same at the beginning.
I mean, they're all kind of in the habitable zone, kind of. And I think up to 500 million years ago, I'm not sure about the dates, but I think up to 500 million years ago, it is possible that Venus could have supported or could have looked something like, like the Earth. What's interesting to me is the speculation that, of course, we know that the Earth was impacted by a Mars-sized body shortly after it came to be, right? Like I think the Earth is maybe 4.7 billion years or 4.5 billion years old, and a few hundred million years after that, it was impacted by this giant planet-sized object, which I believe had a very big impact on the fact that the Earth now can support life. I mean, it's not just about the makeup of the Earth. The fact that we have tectonic plates or tectonic motion, the fact that we have a moon, a particular, like we have a very large moon, compared to the rest of the solar system.
So that was the moon broke off of the Earth or off the colliding object?
Well, we don't know, but I think off the Earth, because if you actually do analysis on the Earth's on the rocks of the moon and the Earth, you find some similarities. of course, the moon does not have an atmosphere, and it doesn't have much of tectonic motion either. But it's interesting because I think Venus was also smashed, but the angle of impact was different. It did the opposite of like with Earth. Basically, it gave it a specific, like the Earth had to be impacted at a very specific angle.
And that basically set it spinning on its axis to give it night and day. Tectonic plates.
Yeah, so Venus is the opposite, because Venus actually is the only planet that rotates the other way. Like it rotates backwards, other than all of the other planets. But also Venus, I'm not clear about the details, but I think that the Venus impact kind of turned it into a hellscape. This is just a speculation. It just there's so many theories about this, and I think we're still learning more about why Venus is so terrible. I think the Russians sent a probe down to Venus, touchdown, I think 1960s, and it didn't survive for more than a few minutes. It's immense pressure, plus very high temperatures, and of course on top of radiation.
That's, I think, one of the thing I've often heard people remark about, like scientists, is how closely calibrated the initial conditions of life on Earth seem to be. Like all of these different factors seem to have a really narrow window, which was a Goldilocks zone, outside of which, whatever factor it is wouldn't have supported habitable life.
I mean, there's a book that's been written, I think written in the 1990s, called Rare Earth.
Yeah.
Talking about basically, because if you kind of create a formula for, how many civilizations are possible, like how many intelligent civilizations are there in the universe, who created such a formula? I can't remember the name of the formula. But someone actually did create a formula. I think I'm sure that we talked about it, me and you, before. I can see you furiously typing.
Is it the Drake equation?
The Drake equation, yeah. So it's basically, the Drake equation, nobody really agrees upon the terms of the equation, but it's just the idea that, let's say we can actually boil it down to an equation.
Yeah, so you plug in like numbers of solar systems, numbers of planets, like the Goldilocks zone of distance, things like that.
Exactly. So like the idea here is that, just like we know with evolution, the Earth itself, the conditions of the Earth in a certain way determined in a certain way what kind of life can evolve in it. So, for example, if just like you mentioned, for example, the whole story, the life always adapts to the Earth. It's not the reverse, right? We kind of broke the game as human beings because we got to the point where we can actually impact the Earth ourselves, and we're kind of messing up. But then the whole question, is how rare are these conditions, those specific conditions? Because we're not really talking just about the existence of life, but life which is sophisticated enough to get to the point where it's intelligent and it has self-awareness, kind of basically like human beings. We don't know, because it's quite possible that life is actually very common, but it's all crappy. I mean, not crappy, but basically like microbial,
That's really fascinating. I don't know what to do with that information other than,
I'll tell you
I was
something.
going to just daydream about the possibility of there having been a single solar system which supported 3 planets supporting intelligent life, and what that would have created. Can you imagine if the intelligent life on one planet had become sufficiently advanced to discover the other planets and colonize them?
Yeah, well, that's been written, by the way. So this has been speculated before, that it's quite possible that whatever the first civilization that arises is going to preempt the existence of civilizations around it, because it's going to destroy all of them. And of course, there's also the question of...
Which is basically kind of what Western civilization did on Earth.
I mean, we have egos. We're human beings, right? So like we are... I mean, I asked myself the same question, by the way, about Europeans and why Europeans ended up... Of course, my theory is that it's really had to do with the exploitation of the Americas. Kind of half the planet was ripe for exploitation, and European civilizations, especially European cultures, especially the west of Europe, which is the closest to North America, were able to exploit it more, and therefore they became much more wealthy, much more advanced, etc., than the rest of the world. And what followed was colonialism. But then sometimes I always ask myself, is like, is it something about Europeans or European culture, or is it just the human ego? And if anybody else was in their place, they would have done the same thing.
My tentative conclusion was basically the power corrupts thing, and that they just happened to be handed an amount of power that was never handed to any civilization in human history, and anybody would have done that with such a massive power disparity.
Exactly. And I mean, getting real for a moment before ending our recording, because we're already at nearing 20 minutes. I never really appreciated how difficult it is to do regular recordings, especially video, when there's always so much shit happening in your own private life, and then when the camera turns on, you have to smile and you have to just go with the script, right? Or go with whatever the episode plan is. But I'm getting, like, I was actually worried about this because, like, I have a complicated life, and, I was worried about my mom for a couple of days, and I was like really short-tempered with everybody, and I kind of felt upset about myself with myself. But I really feel an energy come when we do this, because this doesn't feel like work. It just feels like a conversation with my buddy.
I think sometimes when times are tough, you just need to geek out about evolution and the creation of intelligent life and things on such a massive scale that they just make all your problems seem, insignificant.
Really massive scale.
Because at the end of the day, we're all dust on the kind of timeline that we're talking about, and our speculations mean nothing.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to close on this note, but I actually think that the Earth is much more spectacular than human beings. The Earth is much more special in the universe, I think, than human beings are. And I think if we go extinct, I think the Earth will just evolve something else.
Well, I'll catch you next time, my fellow spectacular yet insignificant being.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Let's talk later.
Thanks for listening. To support us, please leave a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also find the link to our Patreon in the episode description. See you next time.